They say love is priceless, but in the Philippines I learned it comes with an itemized receipt. $15,000 for a wedding that never happened. $23,000 for a house I'll never live in. And somewhere buried in line item 47, the exact cost of my dignity. I'm 70 years old from Nebraska, and I thought I'd seen every kind of heartbreak. But nothing prepares you for the moment when the woman you love hands you a spreadsheet detailing how much your happiness is going to cost her family. Not her family, because apparently when you fall in love in the Philippines, you're not just marrying a woman, you're investing in a small corporation that happens to share her last name. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment and tell us where you're watching from. This confession came to us through a letter. The man asked us to share his story as a warning. He's still in the Philippines, still trying to understand what happened. I was sitting in their concrete house in Batangas, staring at a handwritten ledger that looked like something my accountant might have prepared back in Nebraska. Babelin's mother had spent 3 hours writing it out in careful English, complete with a pen and ruler, to make sure the lines were straight. The paper was divided into neat columns: description, monthly cost, annual cost, 20-year projection. I kept reading the same line over and over. Vernon's contribution to family welfare, $2,400 monthly. Babelin sat beside me, translating as her father spoke in rapid Tagalog, pointing at different numbers with a worn pencil. "Papa says this is just the basic calculation," she said, her voice getting smaller with each word. "It doesn't include special occasions or medical emergencies." Her younger brother leaned over my shoulder, trying to see what I was looking at. Her mother brought me another cup of coffee and smiled like she'd just presented me with the deed to paradise. I realized this wasn't a conversation about marriage. This was a business presentation, and I was the potential investor they'd been grooming for 6 months. "You understand?" "Vernon," Babelin's father said through her translation, "we are not asking for charity. We are asking for partnership." He used the word partnership in English like he'd been practicing it. I looked around the small room at the faces staring at me expectantly. Babelin's grandmother was nodding from her plastic chair in the corner. Her unemployed cousin was calculating something on his phone. Even the neighbor who'd stopped by to borrow rice was listening from the doorway. I felt like I was in a board meeting where everyone knew the agenda except me. "In America," I said slowly, "when people get married, they usually discuss money between themselves first." Babelin translated this to her family, and they all started talking at once. Her mother looked confused. Her father shook his head like I'd said something completely unreasonable. "But Vernon," Babelin said, "in Philippines, family is everything. You cannot separate the two people from the family. If you love me, you love my family. If you want to take care of me, you must take care of them too." She said it like she was explaining that water is wet or that the sun rises in the east, a fundamental fact of life that shouldn't need explaining. I kept staring at the budget. Item number 12 was grandmother's. Medicine, $150 monthly. Item 18 was Cousin Ray's motorcycle payment, $200 monthly. Item 23 was sister-in-law's beauty parlor loan, $300 monthly. Didn't even know Babelin had a sister-in-law. "When did you write this?" I asked. Babelin looked at her mother, and they had a quick exchange in Tagalog. "Mama started working on it when you said you wanted to propose," she said. "She wanted to make sure everything was clear before we made any promises." That was 2 months ago. I thought about all the romantic walks we'd taken along the beach in Batangas. All the times she'd told me she loved me for who I was, not what I had. All the conversations about building a simple life together. While I was falling in love, her family was building a financial forecast. "And if I don't agree to this?" I asked. The room went quiet. Babelin's father set down his coffee cup and spoke in a firm voice. "Then you are not serious about our daughter," Babelin translated. "And we cannot allow her to waste her time with someone who is not serious." 6 months earlier, I'd stepped off the plane in Manila, carrying nothing but a broken heart, and the foolish hope that maybe, somewhere in this country, an old man like me might still matter to someone. My wife Margaret had been gone for 2 years, and the farmhouse in Nebraska felt like a museum of memories I couldn't bear to visit. Every morning I'd wake up expecting to hear her voice calling from the kitchen. Every evening I'd set 2 plates on the table before remembering I was alone. My children lived their own lives in distant cities, calling dutifully on holidays, but never really needing me anymore. I'd sold most of the farm equipment, leased the land to my neighbor's son, and found myself with more money than I knew what to do with and no one to spend it on. That's when my friend Eddie, who'd been living in the Philippines for 3 years, called me up and said, "Vernon, you're dying a slow death in that empty house. Come to where people still understand the value of a good man." Eddie met me at the airport and drove me straight to Batangas, where he'd rented me a small apartment near the beach. "Don't go to Manila," he warned me. "Too many scammers there. Here in the provinces, you'll meet real people with real hearts." Eddie introduced me to a local tour guide named Rico, who spoke perfect English and knew every family in town. "You want to meet someone special?" Rico asked on my 3rd day. "I know a teacher. Very respectable family. Not like the young girls who chase foreigners for money." That afternoon, Rico brought me to the local elementary school, just as classes were ending. I saw Babylin before Rico pointed her out. She was helping a little boy tie his shoes, while the other children crowded around her desk. She looked up when Rico called her name, and I swear I felt something shift in my chest. She wasn't beautiful in the way young Filipino women usually were. She was 28, with serious eyes and calloused hands from farm work. When Rico introduced us, she shook my hand like a businesswoman and asked me serious questions about why I'd come to the Philippines. "Many foreigners come here looking for young wives," she said bluntly. "Is that what you're looking for?" I told her I was looking for someone to talk to. Someone who might understand what it felt like to work hard your whole life and then find yourself wondering what it was all for. She studied my face for a long moment, then said, "Would you like to see my family's farm? It's not very big, but my father grows the best mangoes in Batangas." That first visit to Babylin's family farm changed everything. Her father, Rodrigo, walked me through his small plot of land, showing me his mango trees and asking detailed questions about corn farming in Nebraska. We spent 2 hours comparing irrigation techniques and talking about soil quality. Babylin's mother, Estrella, served me fresh lumpia and seemed genuinely interested in my stories about Margaret and our life on the farm. For the first time since Margaret's death, I felt useful. I felt needed. When Babylin walked me to the gate that evening, she said, "You made my father very happy today. He doesn't get to talk about farming with many people anymore." I started visiting twice a week, always bringing small gifts, rice for the family, notebooks for Babylin's students, medicine for her grandmother's arthritis. Each time the welcomes grew warmer. Babylin would meet me at the gate with a shy smile. Her mother would insist I stay for dinner. Her father would show me new improvements he'd made to the farm. I began to feel like I belonged somewhere again. "You're different from other foreigners," Babylin told me one evening as we sat on her family's porch watching the sunset. "You don't make big promises or try to impress anyone. You just fit." I asked her what she meant by that. "Most foreign men who come here, they want to change everything," she said. "They want to take the girl away from her family, move her to their country, make her forget where she comes from. But you seem to understand that family is important here." I told her that family had been the most important thing in my life too, before I lost it all. She reached over and took my hand. "Maybe you didn't lose it," she said. "Maybe you just need to find a new one." That night, lying in my small apartment, I allowed myself to imagine what it might be like to have a family again, to wake up with purpose, to have people depending on me in good ways. Babylin never asked me for money directly, but I started offering it whenever I saw a need. Her mother needed new glasses. I bought them. Her brother was struggling with college expenses. I helped. Her father's motorcycle broke down. I paid for the repairs, each time. They thanked me with such genuine gratitude that I felt like I was the one receiving the gift. The courtship followed traditional Filipino patterns that I found charming after decades of modern American dating. Babylin insisted we always have a chaperone when we went anywhere together. Usually it was her younger brother Miguel, who would sit between us at restaurants and follow us on walks along the beach. Babylin's family invited me to every celebration: birthdays, religious holidays, even casual Sunday dinners after church. I started attending Mass with them, sitting in the back pew and listening to sermons I couldn't understand, but somehow felt connected to. Babylin would hold my hand during the prayers, and I'd think about Margaret, hoping she'd approve of this second chance at happiness. The requests for financial help became more frequent, but they were always presented with such careful documentation that I felt like I was contributing to something meaningful rather than being taken advantage of. "Vernon," Estrella would say, showing me a medical prescription or school enrollment form, "we are so grateful that God sent you to our family. The amounts were reasonable, $50 here, $100 there, always with detailed explanations, always with promises to pay me back that I'd wave away." I felt needed in ways I hadn't experienced since Margaret got sick and I became her caregiver. This was different, though. This was about building something rather than watching something die. After 3 months of careful courtship, I started thinking seriously about marriage. I researched Filipino wedding customs online and talked to other expat men about their experiences. Most of them warned me about the costs, but they spoke about it like it was an investment that paid dividends in happiness. "You'll spend more on a wedding here than you would in America," Eddie told me. "But you'll get a family that actually cares about you." I started planning what I thought would be a modest ceremony, maybe 50 guests, a simple reception at a local restaurant. When I mentioned this to Babylon, she got excited in a way I'd never seen before. "You really want to marry me?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "You want to become part of our family?" I told her yes, and she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. That night, her family threw an impromptu celebration. Neighbors stopped by to congratulate us. Someone brought a guitar, and they sang Filipino love songs late into the evening. I felt like I was finally home. But as the wedding planning progressed, I started noticing that my simple ceremony was growing into something much larger. Babylon's mother would mention additional relatives who needed to be invited. Her father would suggest more expensive venues that were more appropriate for a man of my status. Babylon herself seemed caught between my desire for simplicity and her family's expectations for grandeur. "In Philippines," she explained one evening, "the wedding is not just for the bride and groom, it's for the whole community. People will judge our family if the celebration is too small." I agreed to expand the guest list to 100 people, then 150. The venue changed from a restaurant to a hotel ballroom. The menu grew from simple Filipino dishes to an elaborate buffet with international options. Every addition came with careful explanations about Filipino customs and community expectations. "We want people to see that you are serious about joining our family," Rodrigo told me through Babylon's translation. "A small wedding would make them think you are not committed." The financial requests became more frequent as the wedding approached. Babylon's family needed money for their formal attire, for transportation for relatives coming from other provinces, for gifts to distribute to guests. Each request was presented with apologetic explanations about Filipino traditions I didn't understand. "I'm sorry to ask," Babylon would say, "but in our culture the man's family provides for these things. Since you don't have family here, it falls to you." I paid for everything without complaint because I could see how important it was to her. But I started noticing that Babylon seemed stressed rather than happy about the wedding planning. She would spend hours on the phone with her mother, speaking in rapid Tagalog that sounded more like arguments than discussions. When I asked if everything was okay, she would force a smile and say, "Just wedding planning. It's always stressful." I assumed it was normal pre-wedding nerves and tried to be supportive. One evening, about a month before the wedding, Babylon came to my apartment with red eyes and a folder full of papers. "We need to talk," she said in a voice I'd never heard before. She sat down at my small dining table and spread out what looked like financial documents. "My family is worried," she said without looking at me. "They want to make sure you understand what marriage means in Philippines." I asked her what she meant, and she handed me a sheet of paper covered in her mother's careful handwriting. It was titled Family Financial Planning, Vernon and Babylon Household. I started reading and my stomach dropped. It wasn't just a wedding budget. It was a comprehensive financial plan for the next 20 years, detailing everything from monthly household expenses to her brother's college educations to her parents' eventual retirement needs. At the bottom in red ink was the total $847,000 over 20 years. "My family spent all week working on this," Babylon said, finally meeting my eyes. "They want to make sure we start our marriage with clear expectations." I stared at the numbers until they blurred together. Monthly contributions to her parents, $800. Her brother Miguel's engineering school, $15,000 over 4 years. Her younger brother's future education, $20,000. A new house for her parents, $35,000. Medical insurance for the entire extended family, $500 monthly. A business loan for her cousin's jeepney, $8,000. The list went on for 2 pages, including items I'd never heard of before. "Babylon," I said slowly, "some of these people I've never even met them." She looked confused. "But they are family," she said. "In Philippines, when you marry someone, you marry their family. Everyone contributes according to their ability." I asked her why this was the first time we were discussing it. "I thought you understood," she said. "I've been helping my family for months. I thought you knew this was how it worked." I realized that every small gift, every medical bill I'd paid, every school expense I'd covered, had been seen as down payments on this larger commitment. What I'd thought was spontaneous generosity had been interpreted as acceptance of systematic obligation. The next day, Babylon's entire family gathered at their house for what they called a planning meeting. Rodrigo had printed out additional copies of the budget and had prepared what looked like a PowerPoint presentation, except it was drawn by hand on poster board. He spoke for 20 minutes in Tagalog, while pointing at different charts and graphs. Babylon translated, but I could tell she was summarizing rather than giving me word-for-word translation. "Papa is explaining how Filipino families work," she said. "He wants to make sure you understand that this is normal. All foreign husbands contribute to their wife's family. It's not charity, it's responsibility." Estrella brought out photo albums showing other foreign men in the community with their Filipino families. She pointed to pictures of new houses, graduation ceremonies, and family celebrations, explaining through Babylon how these men had properly provided for their wife's relatives. "Look how happy everyone is," Babylon said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced herself. "This is what successful marriages look like here." Miguel, Babylon's brother, had prepared his own presentation about his engineering program and how my investment in his education would benefit the entire family. "When I graduate," he said in careful English, "I will get good job and help support family too. Your money is not disappearing. It is growing." Ray, the unemployed cousin, explained his business plan for a jeepney route and how the monthly payments I'd make would eventually be paid back with interest. Even Babylon's grandmother spoke up, describing in Tagalog how grateful she was that I would help pay for her medications. Everyone had a role in this presentation. Everyone had thought carefully about how to convince me that this was not just reasonable, but beneficial for me. I realized I wasn't being scammed. I was being recruited for a position I'd never applied for. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked along the beach in Batangas, trying to understand how I'd gotten to this point. I thought about Margaret and what she would have said about all this. She'd always been practical about money, insisting we save for our own retirement before helping others. But she'd also been generous, always finding ways to help neighbors and community members who were struggling. Would she understand this Filipino system, or would she tell me to run? I thought about my own children and how they'd react if I told them I was planning to spend nearly $1 million on a new family they'd never met. I thought about the farm in Nebraska and whether I really wanted to tie up my entire nest egg in a cultural system I still didn't fully understand. But then I thought about how empty my life had been before Babylon and how much joy her family had brought me over the past months. Was love worth this price? Was belonging worth this commitment? The next morning I asked Babylon to meet me alone at a small restaurant near the beach. I wanted to understand her perspective without her family's influence. "Do you really believe this is normal?" I asked her. "All of this financial planning and family obligations?" She looked hurt by the question. "Vernon, this is how I was raised," she said. "In Philippines, family takes care of family. If you have more, you share more. If someone in your family is sick or needs education or wants to start a business, everyone helps according to their ability. That's not greed, it's love." I asked her if she'd ever considered that this system might be unfair to foreign husbands who didn't grow up with these expectations. "But you knew I had a family when you started courting me," she said. "You met them, you saw how we live, you started helping us. I thought you understood what you were agreeing to." I realized she was right. I had seen the poverty, the needs, the tight family bonds. I'd chosen to help financially from the beginning. The only difference now was that they were making the expectations explicit rather than leaving them implied. What if I can't afford all of this? I asked. Babylon's face changed in a way that scared me. Vernon, you told me you sold your farm, she said. You told me you have savings. You told me you wanted to take care of me. I explained that I had savings but not unlimited money, that I'd planned to use some of it for our life together, some for emergencies, and some to leave to my own children when I died. Your children are grown, she said. They have their own money, their own lives. My family needs you now. There was an edge to her voice I'd never heard before. If you're not ready to be a real husband, a real provider, then maybe we should call off the wedding. I asked her if she was threatening me. I'm not threatening you, she said. I'm telling you the truth. In Philippines, a man who marries but doesn't support his wife's family is not a real man. People will not respect you. My family will not accept you. I cannot be married to someone my family doesn't accept. That afternoon, word somehow spread through the community that I was having doubts about the financial arrangements. Other expat men started approaching me with their own stories. Some of them had embraced the system completely. Best investment I ever made, said an Australian named Dave, who'd been married to a Filipino woman for 8 years. I spend about $3,000 a month on her family, but I get love, respect, and purpose in return. My wife's nephews call me Tito Dave and actually want to spend time with me. When's the last time your own grandkids called you? But others warned me about the endless nature of the obligations. It never stops, said a German man named Klaus. First it's the wedding, then it's the house, then it's the business, then it's the medical emergency, then it's the next wedding. There's always something. If you say yes to this budget, you're saying yes to a lifetime of requests. A British man named Tony told me he'd eventually had to move to a different province because the financial pressure became unbearable. The problem isn't the money, he said. The problem is that you never know if they love you or love what you can provide. After a while, you can't tell the difference anymore. The Filipino community had opinions too. At the local market, vendors who'd previously been friendly started treating me coldly. The woman who sold me vegetables every morning shook her head when she saw me and muttered something in Tagalog to her neighbor. Rico, the tour guide who'd introduced me to Babylon, pulled me aside and said, Vernon, you're making a mistake. Babylon is a good woman from a good family. If you cannot appreciate that, maybe you should go back to America. Even the priest at the local church, who spoke excellent English, approached me after Mass. My son, he said, I have seen many foreign men come and go. The ones who succeed here are the ones who understand that family is sacred. The ones who fail are the ones who think they can have love without responsibility. I felt like I was being judged by an entire community for values I'd never agreed to and standards I'd never been taught. Babylon's family gave me a deadline, 1 week to decide whether I would commit to their financial plan. We cannot continue with wedding preparations if we don't know your intentions, Rodrigo said through Babylon's translation. It is not fair to ask our daughter to wait indefinitely for you to make up your mind. The family avoided me during that week. When I came to their house for our usual Sunday dinner, Estrella was polite but distant. Miguel wouldn't make eye contact with me. Even Babylon seemed different, answering my questions in short sentences and avoiding the intimate conversations we'd grown accustomed to. I spent 7 days walking the beaches of Batangas, trying to imagine my life in both scenarios. If I said yes, I would have a family again, but at a cost that would consume most of my remaining assets. If I said no, I would return to the loneliness I'd fled from Nebraska, but with my financial independence intact. The choice felt impossible because both options required giving up something essential. On the 7th day, I made my decision. I asked Babylon to meet me at the church where we'd planned to be married. I wanted to have this conversation in a place that felt sacred, where we could both remember what had drawn us together in the first place. I can't do it, I told her, and the words felt like they were tearing something inside my chest. I can't commit to that budget. Not because I don't love you, but because I can't tell anymore where your love ends and your family's financial needs begin. Babylon started crying immediately. So you were just playing with me, she said. You were just entertaining yourself with the poor Filipino girl. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her being Filipino or poor, but about the impossibility of building a relationship on financial obligations that felt more like business contracts than expressions of love. Everything I felt for you was real, I said. Every moment we spent together, every conversation, every plan we made, that was all real. But I can't build a marriage on a foundation of spreadsheets and budgets. You don't understand, Babylin said, wiping her eyes with the tissue I offered her. In Philippines, love and responsibility are the same thing. When I say I love my family, I mean I will sacrifice for them. When they say they love me, they mean they will do everything to protect my future. The budget is not separate from love. It is how love is expressed. I asked her if she'd ever considered that there might be other ways to express love that didn't involve such specific financial commitments. Like what? She said. Like holding hands and saying sweet words? That doesn't feed my parents when they're old. That doesn't send my brothers to college. That doesn't pay for medicine when someone gets sick. Love without action is just emotion. Love with action is commitment. I realized we were speaking different languages, even though we were both using English. Her definition of love required sacrifice that proved itself through measurable contributions. My definition of love required freedom to choose how and when to give, without predetermined obligations or systematic expectations. The word spread quickly through Batangas that Vernon, the American farmer, had backed out of his wedding to Babylin. I started noticing changes in how people treated me immediately. The woman at the vegetable stand stopped greeting me. The taxi drivers began charging me higher rates. Even Eddie, my friend who'd encouraged me to come to the Philippines, seemed disappointed. "You had a good thing going, Vernon," he said over coffee. Babylin was solid. Her family was reasonable. "You're not going to find better." When I tried to explain my concerns about the financial arrangements, he shook his head. "You think too much like an American," he said. "Here, family comes first. If you can't accept that, maybe this country isn't for you." I realized that my decision hadn't just affected my relationship with Babylin, it had affected my standing in the entire community. In a culture where family obligations were sacred, my refusal to embrace those obligations marked me as selfish and unreliable. Babylin stopped speaking to me entirely. When I tried to visit her family's house to retrieve some belongings I'd left there, Miguel met me at the gate and wouldn't let me in. "You are not welcome here anymore," he said in perfect English. "You hurt my sister. You made promises to our family and then broke them." I asked if I could at least say goodbye to Babylin, to try to explain my feelings one more time. "She doesn't want to see you," he said. She said everything that needed to be said at the church. Through Rico, I learned that Babylin's family was already introducing her to other foreign men. There was a Canadian retiree who'd recently arrived in town, and an Australian businessman who visited Batangas regularly. The family system would continue with or without me. I was replaceable in ways that both hurt and illuminated the true nature of what I'd been involved in. 3 weeks after the breakup, I saw Babylin at the market with a tall, grey-haired man I'd never seen before. She was explaining the different fruits to him, laughing at his attempts to pronounce their Filipino names. She looked genuinely happy, not like someone mourning a lost love. The man was paying for her purchases and asking questions about her family with the same interest I'd shown months earlier. I recognized the pattern immediately. The careful courtship, the gradual introduction to family needs, the growing financial involvement. Watching it happen to someone else made me realize that my experience hadn't been personal. It had been procedural. Babylin and her family had perfected a system for finding and cultivating foreign benefactors. They weren't necessarily being deceptive, but they were being strategic in ways I'd never understood. The feelings were real, but they existed within a framework designed to achieve specific outcomes. I stayed in Batangas for 2 more months, trying to understand what I'd learned and what it meant for my future. I rented a different apartment, farther from Babylin's neighborhood, and started building new routines that didn't intersect with her family's world. I made friends with other expat men who'd chosen to remain single or who'd found Filipino partners willing to live without extensive family financial obligations. I learned that such relationships were possible, but rare, and usually involved women who'd grown up in different economic circumstances or who'd lived abroad themselves. The cultural pattern I'd encountered wasn't universal, but it was common enough to be considered normal by most Filipinos I met. Those who succeeded within it had either unlimited financial resources or complete acceptance of collective responsibility. Those who didn't fit either category often left the Philippines entirely or lived as permanent outsiders. I spent long hours on the beach, thinking about whether I'd made the right decision. There were moments when I regretted walking away, when the loneliness felt heavier than the financial burden would have been. Babelin's family had genuinely welcomed me, and their warmth hadn't been entirely calculated. They'd shared their lives with me in ways that felt real and meaningful. If I'd had unlimited money, I might have been able to build something beautiful with them. But I'd learned something important about myself. I needed to feel chosen for who I was, not for what I could provide. In a system where love and financial obligation were inseparable, that distinction became impossible to maintain. I couldn't live with the constant question of whether I was being loved or being used, even if the answer was both. Eventually, I decided to stay in the Philippines, but moved to a different region entirely. I found a small apartment in a mountain town where few foreigners lived and where my story with Babylon wasn't known. I started volunteering at a local school, teaching English to children whose families couldn't afford private tutors. I formed friendships with Filipino men my own age, who were also widowed or divorced, and who understood loneliness without seeing me as a solution to financial problems. I learned Tagalog slowly, and began to understand the culture in deeper ways that weren't filtered through romantic relationships or family obligations. I found peace in a way of living that honored Filipino values, without requiring me to sacrifice my sense of individual identity. I still think about Babylon sometimes, wondering if she found what she was looking for with the Canadian man or someone else who came after him. I hope she did. I've come to understand that her family's approach wasn't wrong, just incompatible with my own values and limitations. Filipino families do take care of each other in ways that American families often don't. Children do support their parents through old age. Extended relatives do help each other through crises and opportunities. The system works for those who embrace it completely. My mistake wasn't falling in love with Babylon. It was entering a cultural dynamic without understanding the full scope of what was expected. I thought I was dating an individual when I was actually auditioned for a family position that came with specific duties and obligations. If I could go back and do it differently, I would ask harder questions earlier. I would insist on explicit conversations about financial expectations before emotions became involved. I would research Filipino family dynamics more thoroughly and honestly assess whether I could embrace them completely rather than selectively. Most importantly, I would recognize that some forms of love require complete cultural conversion, and I would decide up front whether I was willing to make that transformation. The heartbreak I experienced wasn't about being deceived or manipulated. It was about discovering incompatibilities. That should have been addressed before hearts became attached and promises were implied. I've learned that international relationships require more than good intentions and mutual attraction. They require honest assessment of cultural differences that go beyond language and food preferences. They require willingness to examine your own assumptions about love, family, and responsibility. They require acceptance that some differences can't be bridged through compromise. They can only be navigated through complete adoption of one culture or the other. My decision to walk away from Babylon wasn't a rejection of Filipino culture or values. It was an acknowledgement that I couldn't authentically embrace them without losing essential parts of myself. Some forms of love require surrender that not everyone is capable of making. Today, I'm at peace with my solitude. I found ways to contribute to Filipino communities without the complex obligations that come with family membership. I teach, I volunteer, I help individual students with school supplies or medical needs when I can afford it. But I do it as a choice rather than an obligation, and I maintain the freedom to set boundaries when necessary. I've learned that you can respect a culture without being consumed by it, and you can love people without meeting all their expectations. The budget that Babylon's family presented to me wasn't unreasonable within their cultural context, but it was incompatible with my need to feel loved for who I am, rather than what I can provide. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is recognize when you're not the right person for someone's life, even when you desperately wish you could be.